I'm going to share with you how I propagate tree branches to make new trees. What you want to do is make sure your clippers are treated with like a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. Make sure that you're not spreading disease. You're going to want to do this very early in the spring. So generally in Pennsylvania, might be in like March, early March, mid-March. It's getting a little bit late in the season. So I have some scion wood. I'm going to take some mulberry cuttings. And I only want, maybe like 3 or 4 inches. You don't want anything too long. You don't want the sticks to dry out effectively. So these are plums. I have some cherries here that are starting to bloom. And what we're going to do is I took some sand. I baked it to make sure that there's no bacteria or mold in there for a couple of hours at maybe like 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And I have some containers. So with these containers, I just cut the top off, rinse them out a few times. We're going to fill this up with sand most of the way. And what we're going to do is we're going to add water and make sure it's nice and moist. We don't want it saturated, but you want the sand to basically retain the moisture. We're going to take the sticks, we're going to cut them down in little scion pieces of wood. And I have a little bit of rooting hormone or rooting powder that I'll use to dip the end of that in. And when we go to actually put them in the sand, I just like to take something and poke the holes in before sticking the actual scion wood in, because I don't want to rub off all the rooting hormone and I don't want to damage the end when I'm shoving them into the ground effectively. Alright, so let's get started. So this is sand that I just baked to get rid of any of the moisture, mold, and basically bacteria that might cause fungus or any other plant diseases. So now I'm just going to take some tap water and get this nice and moist. Again, I don't want it saturated, I just want it moist. You can see the air bubbles come up. It looked like I'm pouring a lot of water in there, but if you're looking at the side of this, look, it's still pretty dry down here. So even though it looks like a lot of water, sand can actually retain quite a bit of water in here. So I'm going to keep adding water until I see it kind of get close to the bottom. Once I see it get close to the bottom, I'm going to stop adding water, and that way I don't oversaturate it. But you can see that you shouldn't have any water pouring out of here. It should be just, pretty firm sand. You just want it to really hold the moisture so that the tree can actually grow roots. You don't want it saturated. If it's too wet, it could help rot basically your plant before it can establish roots, and then it could kill the plant. So I'll keep adding a little bit more water at a time. Just keep an eye on the side of the container. Make sure it looks like it's not overly saturated. So I can see that moisture is starting to come to the bottom, so I'm going to stop adding it to this one. And I think that's good. See that I'm not getting water pouring out of here. I shouldn't see any liquid up here. Alright, so that's good. See how this one looks. So I can still see it's wet here and it's dry all the way down here, so it still needs more water. Let that penetrate there. Both of these look like they're moist all the way to the bottom. I don't see any freestanding liquid. So like if I hold it sideways, it's not pouring out. So that's about how moist I want it. I would encourage you, just label what it is. It's actually a lot easier if you did this before you put the sand in, but I forgot. So it's a little bit too much moisture in that one, but that'll probably work out just fine. So not every one of these is actually going to live. So what I like to do is put a bunch of these in here. with the understanding that a lot of them are not going to make it. Okay. I kept these refrigerated and stored in some paper towels so they don't dry out, and they shouldn't be dripping off, but okay. Basically you just want to keep them moist. Alright. So a branch is going to grow where, effectively it's going to have a bud that comes out every one of these little sections. And what I like to do is I want to cut it just below one of the buds, and I want to keep maybe like 2-3 buds above the sand. So I'm going to take a piece and just kind of cut it off like here. So before you use pruners, it's a good idea, make sure to get some isopropyl alcohol and clean them off so you're not transferring diseases from one plant to another. Let's see if I do it that way. So I get close to the bottom of this one. This will help it root pretty good. And then I leave a significant amount above the top one. Basically, this is going to dry out and die off. And then this bud is going to become the branch that continues on. So with this, I'm going to take a little bit of rooting powder. Oop, a little bit more than I was expecting. That's fine. I'll put links in the description for the materials I'm using. Basically, I'm just going to get some rooting powder on there, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to stick it a couple inches down in that hole. And you might want to just push the sand in around it, make sure it's nice and sturdy, and then you move on to the next basically twig. Something about the diameter of a pencil, it usually works pretty well. So I'm going to use bigger and smaller ones. We'll see how they turn out. So I don't like to maim them like this. If you do that, just cut it off again a little bit higher. You want to get a nice good cut. So it's always fun to see how different things work. So this is a little drier, this is a little wetter. Let's see if one works better than the other. Give it a little experiment. Subscribe if you want to see how they turn out. I'm just going to use some clear packing tape and tape these on top. This one with the water, I'm actually going to cut on the side and drain some of this excess water, because if I see standing water, that's a bit more than I like, and that might end up molding, because there's always going to be some bacteria, viruses, and mold, spores and things like that on whatever's basically outside, which is where I got the sticks from, so we'll have to take care of that. The other thing I like to do is I take a rubber band, basically a paper towel, just put it over top. This way it'll allow moisture to go in and out. You can get you can breathe in carbon dioxide and allow the plant to have something to breathe and give off oxygen. So silly enough, I'll actually breathe on these, give them a little carbon dioxide, and then I'll do the same thing with this. So. We'll come back and we'll check on them and see how they're doing. Alright, subscribe if you want to see how these turn out. The other thing to keep in mind is anything that does not have rootstock and you're actually doing it this way, these are going to take a little bit longer to produce fruit. They're also going to become full-size standard trees. If you want like a dwarf or a semi-dwarf to control like the size of the tree and to get it produced a little bit earlier, you're going to need rootstock. With this, it's going to produce, 20-foot trees that will be capable of producing a couple hundred pounds of fruit per year. And to think, one of these trees by itself is like, maybe like $50 to $80. The cost of some sand, a few minutes of my time, and basically some trash around the house, basically whatever. So it's been 3 weeks since I put these cuttings in moist sand with a little bit of rooting hormone to help them get established. And as you can see, let's go a couple here. This is actually Honeycrisp apples. So Honeycrisp apple trees. So I got 5 of them. They're all starting to bud. You can see some leaves on them. Got a bit of development there. If you see the cherries are starting to leaf out pretty good. Bing cherry might be a little bit behind the Rainier cherry, but you can see that the leaves are developing on all the various cuttings. So it looks good from that. Here is the yellow plum. That one's looking very nice. And even at 3 weeks, I can still see droplets of moisture in here. So the sand has still not dried out. Basically, it's self-contained. Basically, I'll blow a little bit of air in there, just give it some carbon dioxide every day or so. And basically, because we heated up the sand before we used it, there shouldn't be any bacteria or mold spores or anything like that to kill off our plants. So they're nice and happy in there, and we don't let spores go back through the paper towel. It's really simple. But yeah, they're doing really good. I've tried them in soil before, and they've molded up within about 2 weeks. Here I have black mulberry, and if you can see there's quite a bit of growth on these. And since I had so many black mulberry cuttings, you might not be able to see it so well through here. Let's see if I can look in there. You can see some green effectively. So they're all growing, they're all doing well. No signs of mold, which is a good thing. That's usually what kills off cuttings. If you have about 70 degrees Fahrenheit with moisture, you tend to grow mold pretty quick. So that's really why we needed to use an inert media such as sand that's been cooked off instead of soil or something like that. Basically, if you have any spores or anything, it'll kill these off pretty quick. But they're all looking good. And just to give you an idea, right now, if I go buy a tree, now of course these are not semi-dwarf or dwarf, these are going to be full standard trees. So if you have an apple tree that's a standard size, assume it's going to be about 20-25 feet in height, and it's probably going to produce over 250 pounds of apples per year. Some of the other ones are going to be different amounts. A semi-dwarf will produce about 60 pounds, and a dwarf tree will be somewhere around 30 pounds. So most of these look good, but one thing I'll show you, it's the very early stage. If you can see that one leaf on a couple of these, on this specific variety, there may have been some mold or fungus spores on the actual plant itself. Having moist conditions around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when you start seeing your mold popping up. But as you can see, the black mulberries and other plants don't seem to be having the same issue. But it's just a matter of time if they keep in a moist environment at this temperature for too long. So we're going to have to take the tops off. It's been about 3.5 weeks. Hopefully the roots have established just enough so that they can keep these things alive. But I have to take the tops off before the mold takes over. All right, check back in a little bit. Bye. So being that I'm starting to see signs of mold on this particular bottle here, I think that these had some mold spores with them. So generally when you start getting mold, they're not going to make it. So I think we're beyond 4 weeks now. Some of these trees are starting to really leaf out. The apples are doing well, because very happy because I really do enjoy Honeycrisp apples. The plums and some of the cherries had a little bit more of a mold issue, so you can see they've kind of just died off. I'm keeping these in a fairly shady spot, basically behind a wall, so south is that way, so it gets a little bit of morning sun before it heats up. So I'm really liking how the Honeycrisp apples are doing, and these black mulberries seem to be taking pretty well, some of them at least. I mean, we got like an inch or two of new growth. This is a probability and statistics sort of thing where not every one of these is going to be successful. So, you know, throw 10 around and maybe you get half of them to live. So I try things out and see how they do each year. The sand is doing significantly better than when I was using non-sterile, basically, soil, because that had a lot more fungus. So this seems like it's a bit more promising. So it's now May 10th, and you can see how we have basically the black mulberry and the Honeycrisp apples are doing fairly well. So the Honeycrisp apples are really putting out good shoots, and mulberry as well. So I just put a little bit more water in here. I'm going to let it drain through the sand. I might put a little bit of fertilizer in the next week or so. So we're going to transplant this. This is a mulberry tree. I try to get it to root. I would say this is probably in April. So you can see I only got one to really root well. Seemed like they were doing well, but I should have probably transplanted them about 2 months into it. So one thing I like to do is just take a look at the ones that didn't do well. Okay, so that was about 1.5 inches deep, and it was about, you know, that was a bit, maybe like a pencil width. Some of these thinner ones, they also did not grow roots. That was a little bit deeper, maybe about 2 inches. So this one again, hey, little pill bug. There you go. So again, about 2 inches deep in the sand. About 2 inches deep. I don't see any root growth on these. Nope, nope, nope. This is why you... Oh, that was a tiny root that was coming on that one. Still about 2 inches. It started growing little tiny hairs of roots on some of these. Alright, now, let's see. Gently, try not to damage any roots that are here. Oof. Now if you look at this one, you can see that there's a huge amount of roots that grew on this. So that's a good amount of roots. So that looks like it's going to be a viable tree. So I'm going to transplant this into some soil. Spread those roots out. Give that a little new home. So I think my big mistake, if I had to do this again, is I probably should have started transplanting these about, I would say about 2 months in, and not wait as long as I did. I waited almost 5 months. Basically, sand doesn't have any nutrients because it's not soil, it's just sand. I put a little bit of fertilizer in there to help out, but looks like only one out of this pot actually made it. But again, this is one that's going to become a full-blown tree, so it was well worth my time and, you know, a bucket of sand. Hopefully you have better luck, but at least I got one. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and have a great day.